All right, Eagles-Packers. Eagles win, going away 22-10. This one felt like, to me, it felt like when the horse breaks its leg on the track at horse races, and they just got to you don't want to do it, but you just got to put it out of its misery. That was this Packer season. It was like, just put it out of its misery at this point. We knew we weren't good enough. We saw it every single time they faced one of the best teams in the NFL, whether it was week 1 against the Eagles, whether it was both games against the Lions, whether it was both games against the Vikings. It was like, we knew they did not have the horses to compete this year. And this one was just more evidence of that. And now they made the more mistakes too. And that seemingly was the problem in every single time. It seemed like every time they faced one of those bigger teams, it was them making the bad turnovers. It was them making the costly penalties. And that was that once again. But then also, by the end of this game, they didn't have their top 3 wide receivers. They didn't have their starting running back. They didn't have their starting left guard. They didn't have their starting center. It was like, what were we going to do? It was just time for this Packer season to be over. But the Eagles were quite obviously the better team in that game, in my opinion, even if it was close towards the end.
Hey, look, you're the Packers guy. I'm not sure to have been able to watch this if I was a Packers guy or Packers fan. It was just painful. I mean, I saw you on Twitter just pointing out how many people they were missing, not just Christian Watson. We saw Romeo Doubs go down. We saw it just seemed like they were suffering a new injury every other play. But despite that, the Eagles could not put this game away. I mean, to me, it felt like the end of Talladega Nights when Ricky Bobby and they crashed their car, and then Jean Girard and Ricky Bobby both get out of the car and they're beating each other up to get to the finish line. Like, that's what the Eagles and Packers were doing. It's just the Eagles should have won this game probably 47-10, but they could not get out of their own way. And the Packers were staying alive. In the second half, it was just like the Packers could still somehow miraculously win this game, even though they have no business and half the team's injured, and they probably have to forfeit in the divisional round because they have so many injuries. But for their defense to kind of keep them in this game, and that may have a lot to do with, I was not impressed with how Jalen Hurts played. And again, he just took 2 weeks off from a concussion, might have been a little rusty. So I'm not going to say, hey, the Eagles can't win in the divisional round. But I just thought the Eagles offense outside of Saquon Barkley didn't look that great. And so even though the Packers were beat up, this was a game until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, if I'm an Eagles fan, I am terrified that we just got Carson Wentz yet again, in terms of we overpaid a quarterback because the situation around him was perfect and he had a little bit of a wrinkle to his game that the league didn't quite know how to adjust for. And now that they do, it's like half his dropbacks, he's down there 5 seconds after, protection's great, and it ends with him just sprinting to the sideline and throwing the ball away. It's like, I haven't gone and watched the All-22 because it's not out yet, but I know early on this season there were plays to be had, and I've said that I do not love, on numerous occasions, how Kellen Moore schemes up this offense. But that being said, it's like, I know what these Packers corners look like, and they're not playing lockdown coverage against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They're just not. And so 131 passing yards against that team, and a lot of those were on a swing screen to Dallas Goedert where he just breaks a tackle and goes out. Like, he was not playing the quarterback position at any modicum of a Super Bowl caliber level. If that's how they look against the Packers defense, I am worried about this Minnesota Vikings team going forward. Yikes. Philadelphia Eagles team going forward. I was ready to say against a defense like the Minnesota Vikings going forward, just because you're going to have to pass at some point. I think someone's going to be able to take away the run. There are better run defenses than the Green Bay Packers out there. And when that's the case, I don't know. He didn't show it today, unfortunately.
You know, this game started off, I felt like, with a little bit of controversy with Keyshawn Nixon fumbling on the kickoff. And I thought the overhead view of that was so bizarre because it looked like he's sitting on the ground, grabbed it, and it should have just been play over. I don't care who comes up with the ball at that point because he's laying on the ground with the football. Yeah. And then obviously the Eagles were given the football, and then they scored a touchdown like 2 plays later, and it was over after that. I mean, the biggest play of the game was the opening kickoff, which you rarely ever see in any NFL game. And so it was weird to have that happen. It just felt like a really weird game all around. Jordan Love's 3 interceptions, where it just felt like he thought I've got to do something. He just started pressing too much because everybody's getting injured, and he feels like he has to make a big splash play to get the team back in it when they didn't necessarily have to do that. Just kind of keep giving the ball to Josh Jacobs. He played well, but like you said, it's probably for the best the Packers season's over because this team, as it was built with all these injuries, probably was not going to be winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that opening kickoff. I mean, I get that the Eagles came up with it and that they almost never overturn those sort of pile plays because, of what goes on. Like who comes out with it matters. And that like Nixon did fumble and you can't feel too, strongly that they got screwed when you did fumble the opening kickoff, regardless of whether you recovered it. But like there were two hands in a ball. If this was judging who caught it, if this was a pass and we had that angle, they 1000% give that to the Green Bay Packers, right? Like there's no even debate here. Even if they called it Eagles ball on the football field, I think they would have given that to the Packers, right? Or am I crazy?
I feel like they would have gone with whatever was called on the field. So if they had said,
so if that was like a pass and that was the angle we had on the pass, you think they would have called still Eagles ball on that? They would have gone with that.
I just don't think they would have overturned it either way. I don't know. It was such a weird situation to start the game off with. That's it.
I will echo your sentiments though on Love, and it's been my biggest criticism of him. And I think he does some things great about the quarterback position, but he has a knack for pressing when they're behind in a way that he just doesn't need to. That's irresponsible, in my opinion. And you see that with the 3 interceptions in this one. Like when they have to come from behind, he's capable of doing it, but he'll do this thing where he does these like back shoulder, just heave it up, or not back shoulder, back foot, heave it up down the football field, like really just throw into windows where he didn't need to at that point in time. And I think in this game, you saw that on a couple of occasions, but the last one I can forgive. Like that was truly you needed to do it. They were dead in the water at that point. But first two, I don't know. Jordan Love, far from a banner game from him. But like once you lose your top 3 wide receivers, shoot, good luck against that Eagles defense. You got to give credit to them too, because that unit is a house on the Eagles side.
Let me ask you this real quick, Renner. So you have Jordan Love. The last 2 times we've seen him in a postseason game, obviously last season against the 49ers in that 24-21 loss, he threw 2 interceptions in the second half of that game. So he now has 5 interceptions in his last 6 quarters of playoff football. Does that leave a bad taste in your mouth, or is it kind of this time around, he didn't have anybody to throw the ball to? I'm going to let this one go. Let's move on to next season.
It leaves a bad taste in my mouth for sure, but it's like this is the hand you're dealt, right? Like you have you've hitched your wagon to Jordan Love. And so now you have to find a way to win with it. And why I said all offseason, I was like, their receivers are not reliable enough. They could be good enough 1 game here, 2 games. They are not reliable enough week in and week out to be a championship team. I just didn't think this receiving core, and I know everyone was in love with it because they had second half of last year and they were all so young. And so you project like this next step, but I saw them all in college and I saw them like at their best in college, and none of them had good ball skills. And to me, a trait that goes from college to the NFL that rarely changes a ton. Now you can improve a little bit, but you don't go from dropping over 10% of your passes that were catchable the way Christian Watson did, the way Dontavion Wicks did, the way Luke Musgrave did at the collegiate level, to then all of a sudden being Larry Fitzgerald, right? Larry Fitzgerald didn't drop balls when he was like 6 years old, and he still didn't drop balls when he got to the NFL. Some of that is just how you track the ball and how consistently you can make those plays at the catch point then. And they unfortunately they don't have a single guy I trust in that regard. They don't have a Drake London-esque sort of guy who you just know is coming down with it in those sort of situations. So Jordan Love likes to throw those passes too, is the problem. And you see it on display week in and week out that when he does throw those, more often than not, Pack receivers aren't coming down with it. So.
Renner, are you saying you want your team to go out and trade for Tyreek Hill? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's not the answer in my opinion. Even though he's the answer for a lot of things, I don't think he's the answer to this question.